Hi, my name is Graydon Hill. This is my video presentation for CYBR 332 Section 50 Cybersecurity Principles and Applications at Metropolitan State University the summer 2026 semester under the instruction of Abdirahman Jirde. As the content of this video pertains to cybersecurity attacks, this video is solely for educational purposes, and neither Metropolitan State University nor I am liable for any damages that could be caused by these demonstrations. For this story, we're going back to 2005. This was the Wild West of the internet and social media specifically. We were just moving out of what we now call Web 1.0 into Web 2.0. Web 1.0 is characterized by static HTML pages and hyperlinks. Web 2.0 was when the content on the internet shifted into user-created content. Suddenly, you didn't have to know how to code to make your voice heard online. One form of this was blogs, another form was social media. MySpace was a pioneer of social media, and in 2005, MySpace had 32 million users. It allowed people to express themselves in creative ways. They could add friends, customize their own profiles with CSS, and they could post a list of their heroes. MySpace was the largest social media platform in the world. Then, on October 5th, MySpace fell apart, and it was all the fault of this man, Samy a man who over 1 million MySpace users had recently proclaimed their hero. Let me explain. Samy was a 19-year-old computer enthusiast. He had done some hacking in the past, but had never done anything with malicious intent. When he was 15, he played a lot of Counter-Strike, a first-person shooter game. He noticed that the computer plays the sound of footsteps when another user is near, and it played that noise in the correct left or right speaker. He realized that the computer must know the location of that player, and if the front end could tell the computer where to play the sound out of the speakers, then he could make the front end tell him exactly where that player was. He started experimenting with packet sniffing and began intercepting the data to help him cheat at the game. He created many different Counter-Strike cheats after the success of his first one. The game developers started to catch on. They kind of began a back and forth of the game implementing new security and Samy finding new exploits around those new improvements. He eventually dropped out of high school and began learning about networks rapidly by creating these cheats. He was still 15 when a company saw his cheat software and hired him to code for them remotely before he moved out to LA and started working on VoIP solutions. It was then that Samy discovered MySpace. He made a profile and began to connect with his friends. He loved it because it gave you so many customization options. He enjoyed the platform, and similar to how he'd hacked Counter-Strike, the video game, he began to notice little exploits that he could use to make his MySpace page unique from other users. For example, he noticed that the number of photos you could upload was limited to 12, but it wasn't limited by the API, but rather the front-end validation. So he skipped the front-end validation and added 13 photos to his profile. He didn't do any of this with malicious intent, but rather to entertain himself. When trying to make his relationship status something other than one of the 3 presets, Samy then found a workaround that let him inject JavaScript code onto the page. Now that he did that, he realized that he could make the code execute on any browser that visits that page. He thought that it would be funny to make any profile that visited his, add him as a friend, and post "Samy is my hero." After a few days, he was frustrated that his message hadn't spread. Then he figured, if I can make the profile copy the text, I can also make the profile copy the script itself that copies the text. So he made the small adjustment and went to bed, hoping that in about a week the code would end up on roughly 100 of his friends' pages, and it would be a funny joke. Samy woke up the next day with 10,000 new friends, meaning the code had executed on 10,000 people's browsers. Samy hadn't considered the speed of growth that he'd just unleashed, and it was absolutely uncontrollable. In 20 hours, the virus had spread to over 1 million profiles, making it the fastest spreading virus of all time. What Samy wrote was this. This is a script that was injected into MySpace through the public-facing front end that will run on other user systems when they encounter it. In other words, this is the most infamous piece of cross-site scripting of all time. So how does cross-site scripting work? I've created a little demo page here to show you. Typically, you expect users to use input fields to just put text. So here, you provide users a text box to create a post. Some clever users realize that this text will be read by the browser, and it may be parsed as if it was part of the web page itself. So if instead of entering text here, you enter computer instructions, an unprepared input may execute those instructions. Many of the specific vulnerabilities that Samy exploited are now protected by HTML5 and new browser standards, but exploits still very much exist. We can trick the browser to run a script hidden within an image tag. If the image doesn't load, we can run the code hidden in the onError function. If we intentionally give an image that won't load, this script will run. As you can see, our alert appears. This alert doesn't do any harm, but imagine the damage that we could do with a little more effort. We have the power to run scripts on somebody else's computer. To protect against this, we need to distill the input with input validation. A simple version of that is to change the script from the inner HTML tag to exclusively read it as text using the text content tag. Now, when we try to enter our attack, it comes through as plain text rather than being read as a script. Samy's specific form of cross-site scripting was a worm. A worm starts as a single piece of code that automatically copies itself into a new location. It doesn't just copy some text, it literally copies every character of its own code, meaning that this new copy can also replicate itself. One copy of the code turns into 2 just as quickly as 2 turn into 4, or 4 to 8, or 8 to 16, which isn't very many, but 20 iterations later and you've reached 1 million. That's the power of exponential growth. Samy had his goal to copy his message to people's profiles. To do this, he first needed to be able to run a script. It's not like MySpace didn't include any input sanitization. They had planned ahead. MySpace blocked script tags, but Samy knew that some browsers, including Internet Explorer, would read the JavaScript within style tags. It's very similar to how we hid our code in the onError function of an image tag. So in his style tag, he set the background image URL to the actual JavaScript code that he wanted to run. This specific exploit wouldn't work anymore due to new built-in HTML security, but it definitely worked back in 2005. Since you can't place quotes in the CSS background tags, he wrote the JavaScript in an expression tag that was then used by the background tag. Let's break out the code to make it more clear. So when the browser created this div, it actually ran the script. Let's move the script here into a JavaScript file. This is the actual script that ran. Samy was limited by the number of characters that he could put in the input field, so he eliminated all white space. I've added that white space back in. Now we can actually read the code in a structured way. He'd replace the variable names to make them shorter and bypass more input sanitization. Let's fix the variable names. The next problem was that MySpace stripped out the word JavaScript from any input. To get around this, he placed new line characters in the middle of the word. Now MySpace wouldn't notice the word JavaScript, but the browsers would still read it. He also attempted to use quotes that were necessary to the script, but MySpace stripped out all escape characters. To get around this, he converted the quotes to ASCII, which MySpace didn't catch. See this double quote and single quote variable up top? Let's put them back in as normal. MySpace also strips out some scripting keywords, such as document, body, inner HTML. To get around this, he used an eval expression. Let's clean those up too. Now some final reordering and cleaning up. This is essentially the code that Samy started with before figuring out all the little tricks required to get MySpace to run it. He used Ajax, a XML HTTP tool, to control the client and make it send GET and POST messages. Ajax automatically included the user's session cookies to the server, making the user's requests valid. He used document body inner HTML to get the page source, which includes the ID of the user. Then he used html.indexOfFriendID to get that ID. So Samy's goal was to add himself as one of the user's heroes. He used a GET request and stored the list of current heroes. Now he wanted to make a post request, but he found that he couldn't send a post request to myspace.com if the user was on profile.myspace.com. To fix this, he reloaded the exact same page but without the profile subdomain, which allowed the post request to be made. This still didn't work because MySpace requires a random hash to be sent with the post that is included on the GET result for the page you want to add as a friend. So the script makes a GET request, parses for the hash, and finally sends the post. So again, all of this was condensed down due to maximum length constraints, and the variable names were turned arbitrary and all of the white space was eliminated. So we ended up with this block of code. I've made another demo to briefly demonstrate the final effect of Samy's code. Let's log into MySpace as me, Graydon. As you can see, I have no heroes on my page. Let's visit Carolyn's page. Also no heroes. Let's visit Samy's page. Here you can see that he has listed himself as his hero. That's kind of strange, but let's look at what happened to my account. Samy's now listed as one of my heroes. Now let's log in as Millie. Millie has no heroes on her page, but if we view Graydon's page, we see that Samy is a hero. As you can probably predict, Millie's page also now has Samy listed as a hero. If we log in as Carolyn, it doesn't matter which page we now visit, any of them will add Samy as one of Carolyn's heroes. You can see how insanely quickly this thing could spread through MySpace as a whole. And it did. Like I said earlier, it hit 1 million users in 20 hours. So when Samy woke up, it was still in the early stages of the virus. But he had 10,000 new friends. He was panicking. He sent an anonymous email to MySpace and explained to them what the code was doing. He included how to fix the problem. He removed the code from his own page, but as we discussed, it's a worm. It doesn't matter at all that he took it off of his own page. It still exists everywhere else. Eventually, he sees that MySpace as a whole was taken down. He waits and the site eventually comes back up. For 6 months, he doesn't hear anything, so he goes back to his regular life. But suddenly, there are a ton of LA District Attorney agents in Samy's apartment. They have a warrant to remove all electronics from his apartment, and he sees on the warrant the word MySpace. They take his computers and leave. The LADA prosecutors propose that Samy be banned from using computers for the rest of his life, and that he should serve time in prison. Using computers was Samy's only source of income. It's all he knows how to do, and at this time, he's caring for his mother as well. He was eventually put on probation, banned from using computers, and received a $20,000 fine. He had to serve 720 hours of community service. However, after 2 years of probation, in 2007, Samy was a model citizen and the probation was lifted. He was allowed to touch computers again. He said that it was an easy task because he didn't intend to do anything malicious in the first place. He didn't intend to spread viruses, and he didn't write any while he was under probation. Samy almost immediately began to start hacking credit cards when he got to touch computers again. But this time, he wasn't hacking for his own benefit. He didn't steal any credit card numbers. He was finding exploits that bad actors could use to decrypt credit cards with something called NFC chips. He let the world know that the chips weren't safe to use, and therefore he forced the credit card companies to enhance their cryptography. He would go on to blog about vulnerabilities in other technologies and equipment. By spreading the word of security risks, he forced companies to acknowledge the vulnerability and fix it, resulting in a smaller attack surface and fewer victims. Samy also developed something called EverCookie to show users some of the many ways that companies can maliciously store data on your computer without you knowing it, even if that user deletes their cookies. While the intent was to show the vulnerability and encourage people to fix it, the NSA ended up using techniques from EverCookie to track US citizens. However, I still think EverCookie is a net positive for the world of cybersecurity. It allows people to test against known vulnerabilities rather than keeping them quiet and letting more attackers exploit them. Browsers can test if their incognito works against EverCookie. It's a tool that is intended to prevent attacks, and it does exactly that. The big ethical question surrounding all of this is it okay to expose known vulnerabilities to the world? If you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend you listen to the Darknet Diaries interview with Samy. In it, he addresses the ethical question. When asked why giving the world the ability to exploit vulnerabilities is ethically okay, he replied, "The world has always had the capability of doing it, right? How do you know other people aren't doing it already? I would suspect that there are plenty of organizations who are doing it, they're just not going to tell you about it." Samy also states that he often goes directly to the company with the vulnerabilities he finds before publishing them. If the company refuses to address the situation, he lets people know about it. They often eventually fix it due to public pressure. Samy's story may have started out with a teenager accidentally breaking the largest social media site in the world, but it ends with a deep ethical question about the responsibility we have, not only as coders, but as end users. I believe Samy's evolution from the curious hacker to the seasoned cybersecurity professional, helping others learn and forcing companies to change their ways, is an important lesson for everybody who's interested in the field. By choosing to expose the flaws of major software companies rather than hiding them, we can change the landscape for end users and provide a safer internet for everybody. Thank you for watching my presentation, and please remember to sanitize your inputs. Here are my sources for this video.